This is the second in a series of tutorials concerning web services. In the first tutorial, we took an integration server flow service and created a web service provider. That is, we exposed the flow service as a web service and created a WSDL interface for this service. In this tutorial, we will create a web service consumer. We will take a WSDL file, import that into the development environment, and create an integration server service for connecting to the external web service. We also call this a web service connector. For creating our web service, we are going to use a publicly available web service. In this browser, we have navigated to a site that provides weather forecasts for U.S. cities. If I click on the link, Get Weather, we are provided with a sample SOAP request and response. You'll notice the request is looking for an input of the name of a U.S. city, and the output, which is the weather result, will be a string that contains the forecast for that city. We can also view the WSDL file for this request as well. At this point, I'm going to take the URL for the WSDL file and copy it to the clipboard so that we can import it into the development environment. You'll notice that I am in the service development perspective of the Eclipse-based development environment called Designer. You'll notice that there's a series of packages. I'm in the package navigator, and there's a package called Tutorials. Under Tutorials, there's a series of folders. I'm going to open the folder called Web Services and click on the Consumer folder. At this point, I'm going to right mouse button on the Consumer folder and click the New button and navigate down to Web Service Descriptor. At this point, I can provide the name of the new web service consumer which we wish to put in the Consumer folder. I'm going to call this Get Weather by City WS Consumer. We're creating a consumer, and we're going to use a WSDL interface to access the Get Weather service. I'm going to click on File or URL, and I'm going to paste in the URL that I'd copied to the clipboard earlier. At this point, I'm going to click Finish. And now we have created in our Consumer folder a connector folder with a web service connector that will allow us to execute the Get Weather web service. The web service connector that we created is actually an integration server flow service. If we expand this flow service, we can see that ultimately a SOAP client request is going to be sent to that web service. So at this point, we can execute this client connector, and we can run it like we would run any other flow service. And you can see that the input signature, based on the WSDL we brought in, is we are looking for the city. In this case, I'm going to provide the city of Chicago and execute. Down under our service result tab, we can see the results of this service execution, and we can see that the weather result, or the forecast for the city of Chicago, is sunny. Again, a web service connector behaves just like any other integration server flow service. It can be executed and orchestrated. If I open my services folder, you'll notice that there's a service in here called Get Customer by ID, which actually executes a JDBC adapter service which goes out and selects customer by ID. This is a JDBC adapter service which goes out to a relational database and retrieves a specific customer record by ID. I can take my web service connector and drag that into my Get Customer by ID service. If I click on that service and come down to the pipeline tab, you can see that the input for Get Weather is the city, and the output of my select customer also contains the city as well. So I can take my city from my output of my first step and map that into the input of my Get Weather web service invocation. At this point now, I can save this service and execute it and get customer by ID. This specific value here, LETSS, will retrieve a customer that has a city of San Francisco. If I execute this, we can see in our output here, the output of the first step was San Francisco, and that the weather forecast for San Francisco, as can probably be well anticipated there, is rain. This has been creating a web service consumer.